Why is it that a single answer can change the course of your life? Have you ever asked a simple question, expecting a simple answer, only for your world to start spinning? If you're a parent, you know that your children grow, keep their own secrets, and sometimes surprise you in ways you couldn't have imagined. But nothing in life prepares you for the kind of surprise that makes your heart both drop and race at the same time. I remember the day starting out like any other. The kettle whistled, the window let in gentle morning light, and I felt a sense of quiet comfort. Family had always been the anchor in my life, the thing I could trust, lean on, and understand. I always thought we shared everything. After all, isn't that what family does? Yet, looking back, I wonder if we ever truly see every layer that's happening under the surface. My daughter-in-law always brought a spark into our home. Her laughter was easy. She'd help tidy up after dinners, never letting me lift a finger. I thought we had a special bond, one that didn't need words, just shared smiles across the table. My son, too, seemed happy. Maybe a bit tired lately, but nothing unusual. Life can be busy, and I let those thoughts pass. But in my heart, sometimes I wondered if I was missing something. Isn't it funny how tiny doubts can hide behind all the happy moments, too shy to come out, but always there? Every so often, I'd catch a whispered phone call or a quick look exchanged between the two of them, and I'd tell myself not to worry. After raising a family, you learn to give them space, to trust. Still, I found myself thinking, have I truly been paying attention? Can love actually keep you in the loop, or does it sometimes leave you looking through a frosted window? As the days went on, I couldn't shake this feeling deep inside. Was something changing that I just couldn't see? Was I about to learn something I never expected? Looking back, it's amazing how life can flip in one moment before you even notice. Sometimes all it takes is one question. And sometimes the answer is so unexpected, it makes you question everything you thought you knew. The thing about family is you think you know their every laugh, every sigh, every small sign that something is wrong or right. That's how it had always been for me. Every morning my house was like a gentle puzzle. I'd listen for little clues. A cheerful, "Good morning," the scent of strong coffee, the sound of my son searching through drawers for his keys. If there was tension, I'd notice it in quiet footsteps or a pause in conversation. That's what family is, or so I thought. My son moved out a few years ago, but he still visited often, sometimes alone, sometimes with his wife beside him. Every visit felt warm, almost like the old days when our home was filled with noise and the walls remembered laughter. Of course, life isn't always like a photo album. There are quiet times too. Sometimes I'd wait for a call or hope for a visit that wouldn't happen. I'd scroll through old messages, making sure I hadn't missed anything important. Lately, though, there had been a shift. Nothing huge or loud, just a feeling that settled over our family like a thin fog. My son seemed busy, distracted even when he tried to smile. My daughter-in-law was always kind, but her words felt lighter, as if she was choosing them carefully. I'd notice her checking her phone and glancing at my son, almost waiting for his silent signal before speaking. Those moments would pass in a heartbeat, and we'd all move on. Still, something inside me whispered, "Pay attention." On one quiet afternoon, I invited them over for dinner. The house felt happier with them inside. There's a comfort in the sound of familiar voices and dishes clinking in the sink. I made their favorite meal, even dessert, hoping to stretch the evening a little longer. As we ate, I noticed their hands reaching for each other under the table, then pulling away, as if unsure of who might notice. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to nerves. Maybe it was just one of those days. Conversation came and went in waves. I asked about work, laughed at silly stories from the past, and remembered old family recipes. Yet underneath the smiles, there was an itch I couldn't scratch. Was there something I was supposed to ask? Was there a question they hoped I wouldn't ask? Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at them, wondering about the things they didn't say. I remembered being young once, wanting to carve out my own life away from watching eyes. Maybe that's what was happening here. But then, why did it feel so different this time? Why did I feel like I was missing a piece of the story? After dinner, my son offered to wash the dishes, something he never did growing up. I watched them working together at the sink, trading quiet words I couldn't hear. I should have felt at peace, but instead, worry grew inside me. I thought back over our day, their careful words, the way they walked into the house together, but not quite as close as before. Was it something I'd done, or was there a secret between them that I would soon discover? Later that night, after they left, I wandered through the house, tidying up and listening to the silence. It amazed me how a home can be so full and so empty in the very same moment. Everything looked normal, and yet nothing felt the same. I lay awake that night, going over every word spoken at dinner, searching for answers in memories that were still so fresh. It's funny how, when you're a parent, you spend years looking out for your children, helping with homework, nursing fevers, drying tears. You do your best to keep them safe. And then one day, they're grown, making choices, keeping secrets, maybe even hiding things to protect you. Or is it to protect themselves? That thought kept me up, spinning new worries and old memories into a knot I just couldn't untangle. Families are built on trust. But sometimes trust is like a thin sheet of ice, strong if you don't look too closely, but fragile if you press your weight on it. I wondered if ours could hold, or if it was about to crack in ways none of us could fix. I wished, more than anything, for answers to the questions I hadn't even found the words to ask. As sleep finally found me, I held on to hope. Maybe, in the days to come, the truth would be kind. Or maybe it would come in the most surprising way, just when I least expected it. There's a certain calm that settles in after a family dinner, but it didn't stay with me long that night. Even as I tried to clear my mind, little things kept coming back, moments that seemed ordinary until I looked at them under a new light. I found myself walking around the house, tidying up, as if keeping everything neat would somehow bring back the clarity I'd lost. The laughter from earlier felt distant now, echoing against walls that suddenly seemed too quiet. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had slipped by me, just out of reach. Days passed, and I tried to let go of my worry, telling myself not to read too much into small things. But it's hard to silence the voice inside, the one that wants to make sense of every missed look, every hushed word. My son's calls grew shorter, coming at odd hours with rushed hellos and promises to visit soon. His wife sent messages that were always polite, thanking me for the last meal, asking about my health, never quite opening up beyond the surface. I read those words a few times, wondering if there was something hidden between the lines. I found myself missing the days when conversations flowed so easily. It was one morning, while sorting through old photos, that I realized how much had changed. Looking at the faces smiling back at me, I felt both joy and sorrow. The pride of watching my boy grow, the hope that his new family would bring him happiness. But the question stuck with me, was he happy now? Was she? Or were they both carrying something too heavy to share? As I walked through the garden, trimming flowers and pulling weeds, my thoughts wandered. I remembered a time when secrets didn't belong in our home. Every triumph, every trouble was shared, sometimes right away, sometimes after a gentle nudge. But the silence that had crept in seemed different, deeper. I tried to make sense of it. Was I too focused on small details? Was I imagining worries where there were none? Or had I missed something important while trying to give them space? Neighbors stopped by now and then, making small talk about the weather and everyday life. Some asked about my son, remembering him from his younger years. I'd smile and tell them he was fine, building his life, visiting often. But inside, I wondered how much I really knew. You want the world to see your family as happy, strong, together. But behind closed doors, there are always things left unsaid. On a rainy afternoon, I decided to call my son, hoping a simple chat would help clear the air. The phone rang a few times before he answered, voice cheerful. We spoke about work, plans for the weekend, favorite meals, anything but the questions that had settled in my chest. I wanted to ask if everything was all right, to reach beyond the surface, but each time I tried, I found myself hesitant. Maybe I was afraid of what I might hear. After we hung up, I sat with the quiet for a long time. I thought about my own parents, the secrets they must have kept, the worries they never voiced. Families are made of memories, but also of mysteries, small gaps between what we know and what we feel. I couldn't help but think maybe this worry was part of loving someone, not just in the sunny moments, but in the darkness too. Later, as the sun set, I wrote a letter to my son and his wife. Not a long one, just a few simple lines, sharing memories from when he was young, letting him know that no matter what, our home was always open. I didn't mention my worries or the distance I felt. I just wanted them to remember the warmth, the love, the trust that shaped our lives. I folded the letter and placed it where I knew they'd find it on their next visit. It wasn't a solution, but it was a start, a step toward the answers I hoped would come in time. Looking back at everything, from laughter to silence, I realized families are always changing, always growing. Sometimes all you can do is keep hoping that love will find its way through the quiet, even when you don't have all the answers. The days ahead felt uncertain, but I promised myself one thing: I would be here, waiting, ready to listen when the truth finally arrived. There are days when everything feels like it's running in slow motion, like time itself is stalling just enough for you to notice the smallest details. As the week drifted on, I started picking up on things that felt out of place. It wasn't a single event, but a series of moments that seemed to echo louder each time. My son's voice had a different tone, softer, sometimes distracted, like his mind was far away even when we were talking. I'd hear him laugh at my old jokes, but the smile behind the words was faded, quick to disappear. I found myself studying their faces more closely, looking for clues. My daughter-in-law was as gentle with her words as ever, always offering to help around the house and asking how I was. She fussed over the tea, folded napkins carefully, but her eyes kept darting toward the window, searching for something I couldn't see. The way she wrapped herself in silence made me wonder, was something worrying her? Something she felt she couldn't share? I wanted to reach out, to say just the right thing, but each time I hesitated. It's so easy to lose confidence when stepping into someone else's story. During one visit, I tried to lighten the mood with silly family stories, tales from when my son was small and life felt simpler. For a moment, it worked. The room grew brighter, even as the rain pattered against the windows, but the calm never lasted. Between laughs, the quiet returned. My son would check his phone, his fingers tapping nervously as though expecting something urgent. His wife would glance at him, and I caught a flicker of concern. It was subtle, the kind of worry people try to hide from someone they love. Some nights, as the world outside went to sleep, I paced the hallway, echoing with memories. I wondered what I'd missed, rewinding the past weeks in my head. Was it something I said? Did I push them away without knowing? A parent's mind is a busy place, filled with questions that rarely find easy answers. Trying to understand, I started asking gentle questions, nothing too direct, just enough to open a door. How has work been? Have you two had time for yourselves? My son's answers came quick, simple, not quite filling the gap I felt growing between us. His wife nodded, thanked me for caring, then returned to stirring her tea in silence. There was warmth in her words, but her eyes looked far away. I decided to pay attention to the small signals, hesitation before speaking, hands fiddling nervously, the way dinner conversations seemed to circle back to safe topics. It felt like standing at the edge of something important, but not knowing how to step forward. One afternoon, just before they left, I caught a quiet conversation between them in the hallway. A few words, barely above a whisper, but filled with more emotion than any spoken out loud. I didn't want to intrude, but hearing how gentle his voice was, how carefully she listened, took me back to when they were first together, hopeful and trusting. That night, alone in the quiet again, I realized how much fears and worries can grow in the dark. When you care deeply, you sometimes feel every tremor, every shift, even when no one says a word. I had no proof of trouble, no signs of disaster, just the slow, steady ache of not knowing what comes next. Through all these moments, I held onto the simple hope that love, once planted, could survive anything. I kept believing that, in time, the weight between us would lighten, that laughter would return with its old ease. Every small step, every attempt to connect felt important. even if it was just listening and waiting, quietly hoping for a door to open. Sometimes that's all you can do. Be present, stay patient, and trust that what needs to be said will find its way out of the silence. Sometimes you find yourself walking in circles, hoping a small clue will give you answers to things that keep you awake at night. I'd catch myself standing at the doorway, watching the daylight shift across the walls, remembering how our family used to fill the house with noise and certainty. Now there was a cloud that wouldn't lift, a sense that something big was happening and I was the last to know. In those moments, I wondered if I was overthinking, making mountains out of molehills, as my mother would say. But the feeling stuck with me, growing heavier each day. One weekend, I invited my son and his wife over for dinner, determined to bring everyone close again. I cooked all their favorites, wanting the warmth of comfort food to gently break whatever coldness had settled between us. The meal began gently enough, quiet jokes, memories of old times, stories that should have set us all at ease. But as the evening stretched on, I started to notice new things. My son reached for his wife's hand, then quickly let go when he caught my eye. The conversations danced around special dates and plans, with their words sliding over details instead of owning them. After dessert, there was a silence I couldn't ignore. I looked across the table, saw both my son and his wife glancing at each other as if waiting for someone to speak. My heart pounded. I knew there was something swirling just below the surface. With a gentle voice, trying not to sound too eager, I finally asked what had been pressing on my mind ever since the changes started. I tried to sound casual, as if the question wasn't the most important thing I'd said all year. Have you two decided yet when the big day will be? I expected laughter, teasing, maybe a story about wedding plans, but instead I watched both of them freeze, eyes wide for a split second. There was a pause, thick and heavy, and my son looked at his wife before answering. She took a deep breath and gave the kind of smile I'd learned to recognize, a smile that means she's choosing her words carefully. "We will let you know," she said softly, her voice gentle but distant. My son nodded, saying, "We are still figuring things out." In that moment, I felt the distance between us grow, not in feet and inches, but in questions and secrets. The rest of the evening carried on, but everything felt different. Every laugh and story felt rehearsed. I tried to push aside my worries, telling myself that young people have their own ways, their own reasons for keeping things close to their chest. But it haunted me. Was I being kept out of something important? Was there a reason my question was greeted with so much uncertainty? Days later, I replayed that dinner in my head as I watered the plants or folded laundry, searching for missed signals. I wondered if there was something about me that made them hesitate, something I'd said or done in the past. Or maybe they were just protecting themselves, afraid I wouldn't understand. Still, the ache of wanting to know, of needing to be included, grew deeper. One afternoon, I bumped into an old friend at the market. She asked casually about my family, if there was any exciting news. When I hesitated, she filled the space with stories of her own children and their milestones. I listened, forcing a smile, but inside I felt a wave of envy. She knew everything about her family's joys and sorrows. My children's lives felt like a closed book, locked away even from me. That night, I sat down and wrote in my journal, hoping that letting the words out would quiet my mind. I wrote about trust, about the meaning of family, about the power of a simple question. I wrote down all the things I wished I could say. "I love you," I wrote over and over, hoping the words would be heard even if I couldn't say them aloud. Later, my son sent a brief message, "Thank you for dinner. We appreciate all you do." It meant a lot, but it was short, like all his messages these days. I replied simply, hoping to keep the conversation open. I wanted him to know, no matter what decisions they made, no matter what was being kept from me, I would always be here, ready, waiting, loving them both. For a few days, things went quiet again. I watched birds outside my window, sipped tea, and tried my best to stay hopeful. It's painful not knowing. Sometimes the hardest part of being a parent isn't letting go, it's not being let in. But I also try to remind myself that patience is sometimes the only key. that answers come on their own time, not ours. When you love someone, you carry both joy and worry. I walked through my days with an open heart, ready to catch every whisper, every hint of what mattered most. Each moment was an invitation to try again, a chance to ask, to listen, to love, even when the answers aren't what you want or aren't there at all. So I held on to hope, trusting that one day they would let me in and the questions would finally be answered. The days that followed drifted by slowly, as if time wanted me to feel every hour and let each question echo a little longer. There were moments I tried focusing on simple pleasures, watering plants, reading old recipes, enjoying my morning coffee. But in the back of my mind, a storm was always brewing. Family used to mean comfort, knowing no matter what happened, there would always be someone to talk to. But now, I faced more silence than I had ever known. One afternoon, the phone rang, my son's voice on the other end, hurried but friendly. We talked for several minutes, and I thought I heard a hint of the boy I used to know, the one with bright eyes and boundless excitement. But the conversation felt like layers of wrapping paper, hiding the real gift beneath. He asked about my day, told me about a new project, shared a few stories, but there was a rush in his words, like he wanted to get through the call without revealing too much. Later that week, my daughter-in-law stopped by herself, bringing me fresh bread from the bakery nearby. She was as thoughtful as always, helping me set the table and checking if I needed anything around the house. As we sat together, she smiled easily, yet her eyes told a different story, a kind of tiredness that comes from carrying a secret for too long. I wanted to ask if she was all right, to offer the kind of comfort I'd always given my son, but I didn't want to scare her away. Instead, I listened, hoping she'd share something that might clear the fog. As we sipped tea, I tried to guide the conversation toward happier memories, hoping to lighten the heaviness I felt growing. She laughed at some of my old stories, but I sensed she was only half there. There was a longing in her voice, maybe for a simpler time or a problem she couldn't solve on her own. Before leaving, she hugged me extra tight. It was the sort of hug that said more than words ever could, full of love, full of worry, full of questions that neither of us was ready to say out loud. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I replayed our conversation, wondering if there was something I should have noticed, a chance missed to offer real comfort. It's hard not to blame yourself when the people you love are struggling. I stayed up late, sitting by the window and watching the cars pass by, my mind spinning stories about what could be causing all this distance. The next day, I decided enough was enough. I wouldn't push, but I could show them I was here, waiting and ready to listen. So I cooked a simple meal and sent a message inviting them over. To my surprise, both agreed to come. They arrived together, calm but reserved, bringing with them a sense that something important was about to be shared. Dinner went quietly at first. The only sounds were the clinking of forks and gentle questions about daily life. When the plates were cleared and the table was quiet, I looked at them, letting the silence fill the room so they could speak if they wanted. After a few minutes, my son looked up. "We wanted to tell you something," he said softly, glancing at his wife for support. She squeezed his hand and nodded. "There's no easy way to say this," she began, her voice steady but trembling just a little. "We've been keeping something from you, not because we wanted to hurt you, but because we weren't sure how." My heart raced, fear and hope fighting in my chest. The words took a moment to come. My son cleared his throat and finally said, "We got married just recently." The world seemed to stand still. I thought I'd misheard, but the look in their eyes, full of honesty, worry, and hope, told me this wasn't some joke or mistake. My daughter-in-law spoke again. "We did it quietly. We thought it was best for us, but it's been weighing on us because you mean so much to us." For a second I couldn't speak. A wave of emotions flooded my heart. Happiness that they'd found each other, pain that I'd missed such an important moment, worry that maybe I'd done something to make them keep it a secret. My mind raced with questions, but my heart told me to listen, really listen, as they shared their reasons. They spoke about wanting privacy, about feeling overwhelmed by planning, about the wish to start their journey together without outside pressure. My son's voice cracked with emotion, trying to explain their choices. "My daughter-in-law wiped away a tear. We hope you can forgive us," she whispered. All I could do was reach for their hands, letting them know with a simple gesture that love hasn't left, not for a second. Words weren't enough to catch the storm swirling around the table, but holding hands was enough to keep us together in that new, honest moment. I realized then that sometimes the most important truths are the hardest to share. Sometimes what feels like betrayal is simply a sign of someone's fear or their desire to protect the ones they love. The journey ahead would not be simple, but there was relief in finally knowing what had been hidden. In the days to come, I would offer forgiveness, patience, and understanding. Because love is not about being invited to every moment, sometimes it is being trusted enough to know when the truth finally arrives. Tonight, something deep had changed, and the road to healing had begun, one quiet word at a time. There are moments in life when you realize everything you thought was solid beneath your feet can suddenly shift. The evening my son and his wife shared their secret was one of those moments. It left me floating between emotions, not sure whether to feel sadness at the years slipping by or gratitude for the honesty finally finding its way in. After they left that night, the house felt both heavier and lighter all at once. I sat quietly, replaying their words and the look in their eyes, trying to make sense of the new world I'd stepped into. Sleep did not come easily. Instead, I kept thinking about the ripple effects secrets can cause. Family ties stretch in ways you can't always control. There's comfort in tradition, in knowing how life will unfold. But when a surprise breaks that pattern, it can make you wonder about everything. Had I failed as a parent? Did I push them too much or too little? Was my need to be close a reason they stepped back? These thoughts circled in my mind through the night, mixing regret and hope together until I finally drifted into restless sleep. The next morning, sunlight poured into my kitchen, but I felt changed. Older maybe, but also something else. I understood now that the faces closest to you can hold mysteries you might never fully solve. At breakfast, I stared at the empty chair where my son always sat. I remembered his first day at school, how much he cried, how I promised him things would be just fine. The same promise echoed inside me now, struggling to find strength. I tried to remember that love is more than knowing every detail. It's believing in someone enough to forgive when surprises come your way. As the days passed, word began to trickle out. Relatives called, curious about the sudden news. Some were supportive, saying young people today want new things. Others questioned the change, wondering why traditions were left behind. I was careful with my answers, choosing kindness over blame. I wanted the world to know that family was still family, even if surprises made the journey bumpy. Friends visited with coffee and sympathy, sharing their own stories of family secrets and surprises. One neighbor told me about a daughter who moved far away without saying goodbye. Another recalled a wedding that was planned in secret and ended up being the happiest day of her life. I listened, grateful not to be alone in this confusing space. Their stories reminded me that change is part of living, and each of us carries private burdens we don't always understand. Life continued in small ways, making dinners, tending to the garden, sharing old photos with anyone who visited. I found myself missing my son and his wife more than I expected, hungry for the laughter and simple conversation that used to fill our evenings. Every message they sent felt precious. I replied with gentle words of comfort, making sure they knew they were loved no matter what choices they made. One morning my son called and asked if I wanted to meet for lunch. My heart leapt at his voice. The past weeks had been tight with worry, and this invitation felt like a gentle easing of the tension. We met at a quiet cafe, away from the questions and looks of family. Seeing him there, relaxed, I realized how much fear and excitement had marked our days. He spoke about work, life, and the plans he and his wife shared. I listened, letting go of my own questions, just focusing on the moment. "I'm sorry we kept things from you," he said. "We didn't want to hurt you. We just wanted our day to be about us." His words were honest, his regret real. I felt a fresh wave of love for him, love that covers mistakes and surprises, love that stands firm through fear. I told him quietly that families can survive secrets as long as there's forgiveness and a willingness to start fresh. That afternoon, I sat in the garden with my son and his wife, watching birds gather at the feeder. The air felt lighter, smiles came easier, and the conversation turned to the future, plans for a new home, dreams for the next chapter. I chose not to press for answers. Instead, I offered stories from my own life, hoping they would see that every generation carries its own kind of quiet rebellion. Later that week, my son's wife joined me for baking. The kitchen was filled with flour and laughter, the kind that can only happen when trust is slowly returning. She shared small bits of her own life, stories of childhood, hopes for the future, the little things that make marriage sweet and difficult. I listened, patient, knowing that every new story stitched us closer together. I began reaching out to other relatives, answering questions with warm reassurances. When a cousin asked why things had happened so suddenly, I simply said that young hearts have their own reasons and we must love them anyway. There were disagreements and disappointments, of course, but mostly there was a growing sense that acceptance was the only way forward. My house became a place for quiet reflection and gentle beginnings. I wrote long letters, telling my son and his wife how much I cared, how proud I was, and how ready I was to welcome every part of their lives, surprises and all. I made space at the table again, made their favorite meals, and waited with hope for the warmth that only family can bring. Through all the fear, excitement, and curiosity, the upsets, the heartbreak, and the hope, I remembered that families stay strong by weathering storms together. We learn, we forgive, we keep loving, even if things do not go as planned. Night after night, I closed my eyes and wished for peace. One day, I knew, we would all look back and marvel at how much can change with a single moment of honesty. Until then, I held fast to the idea that home is never just a place. It's the comfort you offer in days of doubt and the joy you share when mysteries finally come to light. After the dust of those difficult days settled, I found myself looking for small ways to piece my world together again. The quiet after a secret comes out is different from any other kind of silence. It is not empty, it is heavy, full of things yet to be said, full of moments waiting for repair. I tried every day to add a little kindness to the air whenever my son and his wife visited. Sometimes healing begins slowly with a warm meal, a gentle question, or simply a steady hand reaching across the space at the dinner table. I saw them arrive, carrying both hope and hesitation when they came in. My son spoke more softly now, choosing his words with care. There was a nervousness in his laughter, like he was testing if it was safe to let happiness show again. His wife, too, seemed more open, sometimes sharing little stories from her own life. She talked about recipes her mother taught her, the scent of rain on her childhood street, and how she missed the family she left behind. We were all learning how to tell the truth gently, to listen without judgment, and to give each other a bit more room to breathe. One afternoon, we decided to take a walk through the old neighborhood. The trees were shedding their leaves, lining the streets in shades of gold and brown. As we walked in an easy silence, my son suddenly turned to me and asked how I really felt about everything that had happened. My first instinct was to protect him from my hurt, but then I realized he was offering me a chance to be honest. I said that I wished I had known sooner. I said that the hardest part was feeling pushed aside, not because of anger, but because it made me question my place in his life. I watched his face and saw both regret and relief there. He nodded, squeezed my hand, and said he now understood how much a parent's love could ache when left in the dark. It was from my daughter-in-law, thanking me for my patience and for welcoming her into the family even after the secret came out. She apologized for the hurt, but also shared how she admired the way I had chosen kindness over anger. Reading her words, I felt something shift in my heart. Forgiveness is not always one big decision. Sometimes it is dozens of little choices made every day to keep your heart open when it would be easier to close it. Friends still stopped by to offer advice and opinions. Everyone seemed to have their own way of handling family troubles. Some were surprised I had not demanded more answers or let myself get lost in anger. But I knew deep down that my family's peace was worth more than any pride. I also knew that mistakes from young people are often not about disrespect. Sometimes they simply want to make their start together without pressure or the weight of too many expectations. Slowly, laughter began coming back into our home. Old jokes returned as if they had been waiting for permission. We found things to celebrate, no matter how small, a new recipe that turned out just right, a plant that finally bloomed, a letter from a distant cousin. My son and his wife invited me to see their new apartment, proud to show the little ways they had made it their own. There were growing pains, of course, but also new beginnings in every messy drawer and mismatched plate. One night, as I sat alone in the quiet, I let myself hope for more days like these. Maybe someday there would be bigger celebrations, anniversaries, birthdays, even holidays spent together without the shadow of secrets. For now, I reminded myself to cherish every ordinary day. In families, nothing stays the same forever. There are times to let go, times to forgive, and many chances to start over. Trust, I realized, is made up of small returned promises. My son and his wife had come back, not just for me, but for themselves too. They wanted a clean slate, a safe place to belong, and I could give them that by choosing love every single time the memory of old hurt threatened to come back. Little by little, I began to trust the smiles, the shared meals, the way my son's hand would rest so easily in his wife's. No harsh words, no big speech, just a silent agreement that we all wanted things to work. Sometimes it is the quiet, everyday moments that matter most. A walk down the block, a cup of tea on a chilly evening, the front door opening again and again to welcome people home, even after mistakes have been made. I understood now, deep in my bones, why forgiveness is its own kind of celebration. A reminder that love can survive even the biggest secrets and that sometimes just getting through one hard day at a time is the bravest thing a family can do. Looking back on everything that happened, I see now how life teaches us through moments we never expect. The days that followed were filled with small changes, small victories, and more gentle reminders of how family grows stronger even after it's been shaken. There was a time when I thought forgiveness would be simple, a matter of a few words and a hug. In truth, it required patience, a willingness to accept that not everything has a quick fix. Sometimes you just have to let time do its work, guiding everyone back to the place where understanding can take root. My son and his wife began visiting more often. Their footsteps, once quiet and cautious, started to sound bold again in the hallway. I noticed how they lingered a little longer in the kitchen after dinner, not rushing to leave as they had when the secret was still fresh. There were more smiles, more laughter that felt true, and I caught glimpses of tenderness between them that made my heart lighter. We started sharing more with one another, small stories from our weeks, funny things that happened at work, tiny frustrations about the weather or the latest broken appliance. I found comfort in these everyday pieces of life. Each day, I tried to focus on what mattered right now, resisting the old urge to dig for answers. If I worried, I let it pass without making a scene. If I felt left out, I reminded myself that my place in my son's life was steady, even if it looked different than before. There were still old wounds to heal, but with each kind word, each shared meal, the heaviness faded and was replaced with hope. In quiet moments, I watched my daughter-in-law arrange flowers by the window or read a book curled up in the armchair. Sometimes she would help me in the garden, quietly asking about which plants liked the sun best. She seemed lighter, her words more open, and the sadness I had seen in her earlier was replaced by something softer, maybe peace, maybe relief. We talked about her family, about things she missed and things she hoped for. I told her how proud I was to know her, how much I wanted her to feel truly welcome. She smiled, and in that smile I saw gratitude and a promise to keep trying too. My son and I spent an afternoon repairing a leaky faucet together. It was a simple thing, but it reminded me of his childhood, of all the times we figured out how to fix things side by side. While we worked, he started talking about plans for the future. A short holiday, a new hobby, maybe even thinking about children one day. He asked me for advice and listened quietly, his hands steady on the toolbox. I felt something settle inside me, the old warmth of being needed and trusted. Pride replaced the uncertainty I'd held for so long. As the weeks passed, we found ourselves celebrating life in small ways. My son's wife baked her first loaf of bread in my kitchen and insisted we all taste it together. We took silly photos, laughed at the funny faces, and kept them on the fridge for everyone to see. The little things became the big things, every moment a step further away from fear. I started to notice the happiness that had returned to my own heart, a happiness that didn't need grand gestures or long explanations. There were still times when I would think about the day their secret came out. The pain had not disappeared, not completely. But it wasn't sharp anymore. It was a gentle ache, a reminder that every family goes through storms. My friends continued to ask if I had truly moved on, and I always answered that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting what happened. It was about choosing every day to build something better from what was left. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned a soft blue, I sat on the porch while my son and his wife went for a walk. I listened to the sounds of their laughter drifting back toward the house and thought about how much had changed. I realized I was no longer waiting for another shoe to drop. I was just grateful for their love, for their courage, and for the simple joy of belonging. My world felt bigger now, more open and less bound by old fears. Sometimes my son would bring me small gifts, a bunch of wildflowers, a newspaper article he thought I would enjoy, small acts of care that said more than words ever could. My daughter-in-law started calling just to chat, sharing simple things from her day, and I looked forward to those calls in a way I hadn't allowed myself to before. There were still hard days, but the good days grew stronger. We each learned to trust again, one conversation at a time. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. I started to look forward to the future, no longer haunted by what I hadn't known, but hopeful for all the things we could create together. Sitting quietly at the end of a long day, I sometimes thought about how close I had come to losing hope. Secrets had once held us apart, but now they felt like lessons, a chance to remember how powerful love and honesty can be. My family was changed, but not broken. In fact, we were stronger, wiser, and more ready for whatever the next chapter might bring. If there is one thing I would pass on to anyone listening, it's this. When life surprises you, meet it with a heart open to forgiveness and a faith that things can always be healed, one day at a time. If I close my eyes and listen to the gentle sounds inside my home, I'm reminded how far we've come. There's a deep comfort in knowing that even after storms, the sun does return and the air can be soft again. Our family story has changed shape so many times, yet every change has taught us something real about love and forgiveness. I look at my son and his wife now, and I see not just the pain of what we went through, but the hope we created by choosing to keep going together. Some days, I catch myself thinking back to the early signs, those small moments that first suggested something was different. I used to worry about every little silence, every secret, as though one wrong step could ruin everything. Now, I see that families are not perfect, and there is beauty in learning from the hard moments. There aren't always clear answers or neat endings, but there can always be kindness. There can always be another try. I feel proud of the way we held on to patience, of the ways we learned to talk honestly when it was hardest. I see strength in the gentle words my son uses now, the eagerness in his wife's voice as she shares parts of her life with me. We make plans for the future, simple dinners, family photos, new stories to tell, and each plan helps erase old misunderstandings. Our trust is stronger, not because nothing ever went wrong, but because we chose to forgive and listen, again and again. If I could give a piece of advice to anyone who feels lost in their own family's secrets, it would be to keep your heart open. Even when you feel hurt, even when you feel left out or uncertain, remember that love is not about perfection. It's about believing in second chances, about holding out your hand and welcoming people home, no matter how long it takes. Looking ahead, I can't know for sure what joys or troubles will come, but I am certain that together we can weather them. Each day, I let go a little more of the past and look forward to the new memories we'll make. In the end, family is about staying together, learning together, and trusting that even after the hardest truths, it's always worth it to try again.